Commander Zeftar adjusted his recording device as he stepped aboard the human vessel. The ship's name was painted in bold letters across the hull, Liberty's Edge. It looked ordinary enough, he thought. Clean metal corridors, standard lighting, the usual hum of life support systems. Nothing special about it at all. The Galactic Observation Corps had given him this assignment as a reward. 47 wars he had documented over his long career, 47 conflicts between different species, all fought according to the ancient rules. The Corvani Accords made sure wars stayed civilized. A few thousand deaths at most, then the losing side would surrender with honor. Everyone went home to rebuild and try again in a few decades. This would be his 48th war to document. The humans were new to the galaxy, only joining the community 5 years ago. Now they faced their first real test against the Vorthak Empire. The Vorthaks wanted mining rights in the Kepler 4042 system. The humans said no. Simple as that, Commander Zeftar. A young human female approached him. She wore a crisp blue uniform with lieutenant stripes. "I'm Amy Carter, your liaison officer. Welcome aboard." Zeftar nodded with his 4 eyes. Lieutenant Carter seemed nervous about something. Her hand shook slightly as she saluted. Strange. Most species felt excited about their first galactic war. It was a chance to prove themselves on the big stage. "I have prepared quarters for you near the bridge," Carter said. "Captain Morrison wants to meet you before we reach the battle zone." They walked through the ship's corridors. Zeftar noted everything in his recording device. Human crew members moved with purpose, but without the usual pre-war excitement he had seen in other species. No singing, no boasting, no ritual preparations. They just worked quietly at their tasks. "Tell me about your captain," Zeftar said to Carter as they walked. "Jake Morrison has been in service for 15 years, she replied. "Good record, solid commander. He knows his job." Her answer felt incomplete somehow. Carter kept looking away when she spoke. Something bothered her, but Zeftar could not figure out what. They reached the bridge. Captain Morrison stood studying star charts with his officers. He was a middle-aged human with graying hair and calm eyes. Nothing remarkable about him at all. "Commander Zeftar," Morrison said, turning to face him. "Welcome aboard. I hope your stay will be educational." "Thank you, Captain. I look forward to documenting humanity's first civilized war." Morrison's expression changed for just a moment. Something flickered in his eyes that Zeftar could not identify. "Yes," Morrison said slowly. "Civilized war, of course." Over the next 3 days, Zeftar settled into his routine. He observed the human crew, made notes, recorded conversations. Everything seemed normal by galactic standards. The humans maintained their equipment, ran training exercises, and prepared for battle just like any other species would. But small things nagged at him. During one training session, he watched Marines practice boarding enemy ships. Their instructor, a sergeant named Pete Collins, taught techniques that seemed unusually brutal. When Zeftar asked about it, Collins just shrugged. "We train hard, so we fight easy," Collins said. "Better to know too much than too little." The ship's doctor, Karen Wells, showed Zeftar the medical bay. It was much larger than needed for a ship this size. "Why so much space for wounded?" he asked. "We like to be prepared," Wells replied. But her face told him there was more to it than that. Lieutenant Carter remained his main contact with the crew. She answered all his questions but always seemed worried. During their 4th day together, he finally asked her directly, "You seem concerned about this war, Lieutenant. Is there something wrong?" Carter was quiet for a long moment. She looked around to make sure no one could hear them. "Commander Zeftar, how many wars have you observed?" 47. "This will be my 48th. And they were all civilized wars, according to the Accords?" "Of course. All galactic species follow the Corvani Accords. They have for over 2,000 years. Carter nodded slowly. "Right, the Accords." She paused again. "Have you studied human history at all?" "Only what was needed for this assignment." "Your species joined the galaxy recently after proving your technology. You seem adequate." Something like pain crossed Carter's face. "Adequate? Yes, I suppose we are." Before Zeftar could ask what she meant, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Captain Morrison's voice came over the speakers. "All hands to battle stations. We have contact with Vorthak forces. This is not a drill." The bridge became busy with activity. Officers took their positions and began reporting status updates. Zeftar activated his recording equipment and prepared to document his 48th civilized war. Vorthak fleet coming into range, reported the tactical officer, Danny Clark. 12 ships total. They're broadcasting surrender demands. Morrison studied the tactical display.
Standard Vorthak formation.
They want us to line up and trade shots until someone gives up. He turned to his communications officer, Linda Rogers. Send them our response. Tell them the Terran Colonial Alliance does not recognize their claim to this system. Message sent, sir. Good. Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we trained for. Remember your duties. Remember why we're here. Zeftar noticed the change in the crew immediately. The nervous energy was gone, replaced by something else. Something focused and cold. Even Lieutenant Carter's worried expression had hardened into something determined. Vorthak ships are moving into attack formation, Clark reported. They're following standard civilized war protocols. Of course they are, Morrison said quietly. He looked at Zeftar. Commander, you might want to secure yourself. Things may get intense. Captain, I have observed 47 wars. I know what to expect. Morrison's smile was not comforting. I'm sure you do. The Vorthak fleet approached in perfect formation, exactly as the Corvini Accords required. They would position themselves at optimal range, exchange formal challenges, then begin measured combat until one side took acceptable losses and withdrew. Zeftar settled into his observer position, ready to document another civilized war. He had no idea that everything he thought he knew about warfare was about to change forever. As the first Vorthak ship opened fire, Morrison gave a quiet order that chilled Zeftar to his core. All ships, prepare for Protocol 7. Lieutenant Carter closed her eyes and whispered something that sounded like a prayer. The battle started exactly as Zeftar expected. The Vorthak fleet moved into position, their 12 ships forming the traditional attack formation. Their flagship broadcast the formal challenge as required by the Corvini Accords. Humans of the Terran Colonial Alliance. The Vorthak commander's voice filled the bridge. You are outgunned and outnumbered. Surrender now and we will accept your withdrawal with honor. Captain Morrison listened calmly. Standard opening, he said to his crew. They'll wait for our response, then we'll have our ritual exchange. After that, he looked at Zeftar. Well, we'll see. Lieutenant Carter stood at her post, her face pale but determined. The bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. Everything looked normal to Zeftar's experienced eye. Send our response, Morrison ordered. Communications officer Linda Rogers nodded and transmitted the human reply. Vorthak forces. This is Captain Morrison of the Liberty's Edge. The Terran Colonial Alliance claims this system by right of first discovery. We will not withdraw. The formal exchange complete, both fleets began their approach. Zeftar had seen this dance dozens of times before. Long-range weapons would fire, shields would absorb damage, and after a few hours one side would have taken enough casualties to surrender honorably. The first Vorthak salvo struck the human fleet. Energy beams lit up the darkness of space as they impacted human shields. The humans returned fire, their weapons also following the accepted patterns of civilized warfare. For 20 minutes, the battle proceeded exactly as expected. Ships maneuvered carefully, exchanged measured fire, and took calculated damage. Zeftar began documenting what he assumed would be another routine conflict. Then everything changed. A Vorthak destroyer, following standard tactics, targeted one of the human medical ships. It was perfectly legal under the Accords, though most species avoided such targets. The beam struck the medical ship's shields, causing minor damage. Captain Morrison's entire demeanor shifted. His calm expression became something harder, colder. They targeted the medical ship, he said quietly. Sir, it's within the rules, Tactical Officer Danny Clark replied. I know it is. Morrison's voice carried no emotion at all. Linda, send a message to the fleet.
Authorization code 77 Alpha.
Execute Protocol 7. Lieutenant Carter gripped her console. Captain, are you sure? They fired on our medical personnel, Lieutenant. That changes things. Zeftar did not understand what was happening. Protocol 7 was not mentioned in any of his briefing materials. He was about to ask when the human fleet suddenly changed. The careful formations dissolved. Human ships began moving in ways that made no tactical sense according to civilized warfare. Instead of maintaining proper distance, they accelerated directly toward the Vorthak fleet. What are they doing? Zeftar asked. Morrison did not answer. He was focused on the tactical display, watching as his ships closed with the enemy. Danny, override safety limits on all weapons. I want maximum rate of fire. Sir, that violates the power consumption protocols in the Accords. Do it. Engineer Pete Collins began working frantically at his station. I can jury-rig the main batteries to fire in rapid sequence, but it'll burn out the cooling systems. How long before they fail? Maybe 30 minutes of continuous fire. That'll be enough. Zeftar watched in growing alarm as the human ships reached the Vorthak formation and began. He struggled to find words for what he was seeing. The humans were not fighting according to any civilized warfare doctrine he knew. A human cruiser rammed a damaged Vorthak destroyer instead of accepting its surrender. Another human ship used debris from a destroyed vessel as weapons, firing chunks of metal at enemy ships. When Vorthak vessels tried to withdraw after taking standard damage levels, human ships pursued them and continued firing. Captain Morrison, Zeftar said, trying to keep his voice steady. These tactics violate the Corvani Accords. The Vorthak ships that are retreating should be allowed to withdraw with honor. Morrison looked at him with cold eyes. Commander, we never signed the Corvani Accords. But all civilized species follow them. They ensure wars remain limited and honorable. Limited and honorable, Morrison repeated. Tell me, Commander, in your 47 wars, what was the highest casualty count you documented? The Zelani Vorox conflict 3 years ago. Nearly 4,000 dead on both sides over 6 months. Morrison nodded. 4,000. Lieutenant Carter, tell the commander about the sum. Carter's voice was barely above a whisper. First day of battle, 60,000 casualties. Human casualties. In one day, Zeftar's translator must have malfunctioned. The numbers made no sense. 60,000? That's impossible. No single battle could... That was just the first day, Morrison said. The battle lasted months. Over 1 million casualties total. And that was just one battle in one war. On the tactical display, human ships continued their brutal assault on the Vorthak fleet. A Vorthak commander tried to surrender his damaged ship by broadcasting the traditional codes. The humans ignored the surrender and destroyed the ship completely. This is murder, Zeftar whispered. No, Morrison corrected. This is war, real war. What you call civilized war is just playing. Games with rules and referees and participation trophies. The human ship commanded by Lisa Hayes moved to engage the Vorthak flagship. Instead of the careful, measured combat Zeftar expected, Hayes ordered her ship to ram the enemy vessel at full speed after disabling its shields with concentrated fire. Hayes is going to ram them, Clark reported. That ship will be destroyed. Signal Hayes to break off, Morrison ordered. Sir, she's not responding. Wait. Clark paused, listening to his earpiece. She says, and I quote, "Job's not done until they're all dead." The collision sent both ships spinning through space. The Vorthak flagship broke apart, all hands lost. Hayes's ship was heavily damaged but still fighting, continuing to fire on nearby enemy vessels even while venting atmosphere. Get me a medical team to Hayes's ship, Morrison ordered. Then he turned back to Zeftar. Commander, you wanted to observe humanity's first galactic war. This is how humans fight. This is what we are. The battle lasted 3 more hours. When it ended, the entire Vorthak fleet was destroyed. Not defeated, not forced to withdraw with honor, destroyed. No survivors except a handful too wounded to fight, who were taken as prisoners. Zeftar looked at the tactical display showing 12 Vorthak ships completely eliminated. In 47 previous wars, he had never seen total destruction of an enemy force. It simply did not happen in civilized warfare. The Vorthak Empire will demand an explanation, he said weakly. Morrison was already reading damage reports from his ships. Let them demand. We'll give them the same explanation we just gave their fleet. But the galactic community will be outraged. This level of violence is... Commander, Morrison interrupted. You said this was humanity's first galactic war. You're wrong. This was the galaxy's first human war. There's a difference. Lieutenant Carter approached Zeftar as the crew began salvage and rescue operations. Commander, I tried to warn you. Tried to hint that we were different. But you couldn't understand, could you? Zeftar looked at the young human officer. How do you live with this? How does your species survive if this is how you wage war? Carter's smile was sad. We survive because this is how we wage war. The galaxy taught us rules for civilized conflict. But, Commander, we never learned to fight civilized wars. We only learned to fight wars we could win. As the Liberty's Edge moved to rescue survivors from Lisa Hayes' damaged ship, Zeftar realized his documentation of humanity's first galactic war was going to be very different from his previous 47 reports. He was no longer sure he wanted to finish writing it. 3 days after the battle, Zeftar could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the complete destruction of the Vorthak fleet. 12 ships reduced to debris and corpses in a matter of hours. It violated everything he understood about warfare. He found Captain Morrison in the ship's memorial hall, a room Zeftar had not known existed. The walls were covered with names, thousands upon thousands of them, etched in metal that gleamed under soft lighting. "Can't sleep either?" Morrison asked without looking up from a particular section of names. "Captain, I must understand what happened in that battle. In 47 wars, I have never seen such complete destruction." Morrison gestured to the walls around them. "These names are from our last big war. We called it World War II. 60 million dead in 6 years. Zeftar's translator struggled with the number. 60 million? That cannot be correct. No war could produce such casualties. That's just one war, Commander. We've had hundreds of them. Some lasted decades. Some killed entire civilizations. Morrison pointed to one section of names. These are from a single city. Destroyed in seconds by one bomb. The numbers were impossible. Zeftar's own people had fought wars for thousands of years, but their total casualties across all conflicts barely reached what Morrison claimed from one human war. How do you survive as a species with such losses? We don't just survive, Commander. We grow stronger. Every war teaches us new lessons about how to fight the next one better. Lieutenant Carter entered the memorial hall carrying a data pad. She looked tired, older somehow than she had just days before. "The casualty reports are ready, Captain," she said quietly. "Our losses? 18 dead, 43 wounded. Hayes' ship took the worst of it, but she's alive. Ship will be back to fighting condition in a week." Morrison nodded. "And the Vorthaks?" "Total enemy casualties, 4,216. No survivors except the wounded we pulled from the wreckage." Zeftar felt sick. The human losses were exactly what he would expect from a civilized war. The Vorthak losses were beyond anything he had ever documented. "You killed more Vorthaks in one battle than died in most entire wars," he whispered. "That was the point," Morrison replied. "Wars are supposed to end threats, not manage them." Carter sat down heavily on one of the benches facing the memorial wall. "Commander Zeftar, may I ask you something? In those 47 wars you observed, what happened to the losing species afterward? They rebuilt their fleets and tried again, usually within a generation. Sometimes the same species would fight each other 3 or 4 times over territorial disputes. The same enemies, fighting the same wars, over and over? Yes, that is how civilized warfare works. Limited conflicts with acceptable losses prevent larger, more devastating wars." Carter and Morrison exchanged a look that Zeftar could not interpret. "Commander," Morrison said, "let me show you something." They walked to another section of the ship, one Zeftar had not seen before. Morrison's security code opened a door marked Historical Archives. Inside were displays showing human military history. "This is from our American Civil War," Morrison said, activating a holographic display. Brother fighting brother over slavery and political control. It lasted 4 years and killed over 600,000 people. The display showed battlefields covered with bodies, cities burned to ash, entire regions devastated. But here's the important part, Commander. When it ended, it ended. The losing side did not rebuild and try again. The issues were settled permanently through complete victory. Another display activated, showing more recent conflicts. Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. Wars where we tried to fight with limited goals and restricted methods. Wars that dragged on for years or decades because we were trying to be civilized. Dr. Karen Wells joined them, carrying a thick folder of documents. "I brought the files you requested, Captain." "Thank you, Karen. Commander Zeftar, Dr. Wells is our military historian. She can explain human warfare better than I can." Wells opened her folder and pulled out photographs that made Zeftar step back in horror. Images of destroyed cities, mass graves, soldiers fighting in conditions that looked like hell itself. "These are from our major conflicts," Wells said calmly. "Every human knows this history. Every child learns about these wars in school. Why would you teach children such horrible things?" "So they understand what war really is," Wells replied. "Your species has forgotten. You've made war into a game with rules and limits. But war isn't a game, Commander. War is what happens when talking fails and one group tries to destroy another group. Morrison activated another display showing more recent human military exercises. This is how we train our soldiers. Every scenario assumes the enemy wants to kill every human they can find. Every tactic assumes our survival depends on completely defeating the threat. But that's excessive, Zeftar protested. Surely most conflicts can be resolved through limited warfare. Can they? Carter asked. Tell me, in those 47 wars you observed, how many of the same conflicts happened again later? Zeftar thought about it. The Zelani and Vorox had fought 3 times over the same territory. The hegemony wars had been going on for 2 centuries. Most territorial disputes were repeated by new generations. Most of them, he admitted. Because you never actually solved the underlying problems, Wells said. You just managed the violence, made it acceptable, turned warfare into a social institution instead of what it should be, the absolute last resort when everything else fails. Morrison pulled up one final display. This is Earth, Commander. Our homeworld. Every continent has been a battlefield. Every nation has fought wars of survival. We didn't develop civilized warfare because we couldn't afford to. Every war was existential. Win or die. The display showed Earth's surface marked with battle sites. There were thousands of them scattered across every inhabited region. Your planet is beautiful, Zeftar said, looking at images of Earth's blue oceans and green continents. It's a death world, Carter said quietly. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, ice ages, asteroid impacts. Humans evolved to survive constant disasters, and each other. We had to become very good at killing threats quickly, or those threats killed us. Dr. Wells showed him more photographs. These are from our most recent conflicts. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. Even with all our technology, war remained brutal and personal. Every soldier understood that the enemy was trying to kill them and everyone they cared about. But surely now, with galactic civilization, you can learn to fight more. Reasonably? Morrison's laugh was cold. Commander, 3 days ago, the Vorthax declared war on us. They threatened our colonies, our trade routes, our people. From our perspective, they declared their intention to destroy our way of life. It was a territorial dispute over mining rights. Standard galactic conflict, no? Morrison corrected. It was an attempt to dominate human space, to force us to submit to alien authority. We've done that before, Commander. We know how it ends. Carter stood up, looking tired. The galaxy calls it civilized war because you've never faced extinction. You've never had to choose between fighting with everything you have or watching your species disappear. We call it Tuesday, Morrison added grimly. As they left the historical archives, Zeftar realized that his documentation of humanity's first galactic war was becoming something much more disturbing. He was documenting the moment when the galaxy discovered what actual warfare looked like. Captain, he said as they reached the corridor, what will happen when the Vorthak Empire sends reinforcements? Morrison's smile was not reassuring. We'll show them what we showed their first fleet. And if they send more after that, then we'll keep showing them until they stop sending fleets. And if other species join them? Morrison stopped walking and looked directly at Zeftar with those cold, calm human eyes. Then they'll learn the same lesson. The Vorthak Empire's response came 2 weeks later. Not a surrender, not a negotiation, but the largest fleet Zeftar had ever seen. 200 ships under the command of Admiral Krexvar himself, the most decorated warrior in Vorthak history. They're bringing everything they have, Tactical Officer Danny Clark reported as the massive fleet appeared on long-range sensors. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, support vessels. This is their entire second fleet. Captain Morrison studied the tactical display calmly. How long until they reach us? 6 hours, sir. Good. That gives us time to prepare. Zeftar felt panic rising in his chest. Captain, you cannot fight that many ships. You must surrender and withdraw with honor. The Galactic Council will mediate a peace settlement. Morrison looked at him with those cold human eyes. Commander, watch and learn what happens when someone threatens human civilians. Over the next few hours, Zeftar watched something that defied everything he knew about warfare. The human response was not military preparation. It was total mobilization. Cargo ships, mining vessels, passenger transports, even scientific research ships began arriving from across the system. What are they doing? Zeftar asked Lieutenant Carter. Total war protocol, she replied quietly. Every human vessel becomes a warship. Every human becomes a soldier. A gruff man in Marine uniform approached the bridge. Captain Morrison. Colonel Steve Parker reporting with the 3rd Terran Marine Regiment. We're ready for boarding operations. Thank you, Colonel. How many Marines do we have? 15,000 combat-ready troops spread across the civilian vessels, plus another 8,000 ship security personnel who've been cross-trained for combat. Zeftar could not believe what he was hearing. You're putting soldiers on civilian ships? That violates every rule of civilized warfare. Colonel Parker looked at him with amusement. Son, there ain't no such thing as civilian ships when your enemy wants to kill your families. Every ship carries weapons now. Every human knows how to fight. Morrison activated the ship-wide communications. This is Captain Morrison to all vessels in the Terran Defense Fleet. In 3 hours, we will engage a superior enemy force. They have come to take our homes, destroy our colonies, and force us to submit to their authority. This is not acceptable. His voice carried across dozens of ships now converted to warships. Zeftar could see mining lasers being modified into weapons, cargo holds being turned into barracks, passenger ships loading military supplies. We will show them the same lesson we showed their first fleet. Morrison continued. No mercy, no quarter, no surrender. Fight until they stop coming or we stop breathing. Morrison out. The transformation was complete within hours. What had been a small human colony defense force was now a fleet of over 60 armed vessels, crewed by humans who seemed to view death as an acceptable alternative to defeat. Dr. Nancy Turner, the medical officer, approached Morrison with casualty projections. Captain, based on the enemy numbers, we should expect 70 to 80% casualties. Understood, Doctor. Make sure our medical facilities are ready. Sir, 70% casualties would be over 20,000 dead. Morrison nodded. Better than the alternative. Zeftar could not process what he was hearing. 20,000 dead was more than the total casualties from his previous 47 wars combined. The humans were discussing it like routine military planning. Captain, surely you must see that surrender is the logical choice. Your losses will be catastrophic. Commander, Morrison replied, let me tell you about a place called Thermopylae. 300 Spartan warriors held off an army of hundreds of thousands. They all died, but they bought time for their civilization to prepare its defense. Every human child knows that story. 300 against hundreds of thousands? That's suicide, not tactics. It's what humans do when we're cornered, Colonel Parker said grimly. We don't calculate odds. We calculate costs. And the cost of submission is always higher than the cost of resistance. The Vorthak fleet approached in perfect formation, confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage. Admiral Krexfar's flagship transmitted the expected surrender demand. Humans of the Terran Colonial Alliance, you are outnumbered 10 to 1. Surrender immediately and we will allow you to withdraw to your home system. Morrison's response was broadcast on all frequencies. Admiral Krexvar, this is Captain Jake Morrison. The Terran Colonial Alliance does not recognize your authority in this system. We do not negotiate with invaders. Come and take it. The battle began at maximum range with the humans using every dirty trick Zeftar had ever heard of, and several he had not. Civilian ships pretended to retreat, drawing Vorthak vessels into ambush positions. Modified cargo haulers exploded like bombs when Vorthak ships got too close. Passenger liners launched clouds of metal debris that shredded enemy fighters. This is not warfare, Zeftar whispered, watching mining ships ram Vorthak destroyers. This is madness. No, Carter corrected him. This is human warfare. We don't fight fair. We fight to win. The battle raged for 8 hours. Zeftar watched humans do things that should have been impossible. A damaged cargo ship, its crew dead or dying, used its automated systems to ram the Vorthak flagship. Marine boarding parties led by Colonel Parker fought through damaged enemy ships room by room, showing no mercy to surrendering enemies. Colonel Parker's teams have taken 3 Vorthak cruisers, Clark reported. They're using the enemy ship's own weapons against the rest of the fleet. Outstanding, Morrison replied. Tell him to keep pushing. Commander Lisa Hayes, her ship barely functional after the first battle, led a squadron of damaged vessels in a desperate charge against the Vorthak center. Her communications came through broken and filled with static. This is Hayes. We're going in hard and fast. If we don't make it out, tell Earth we held the line. Her squadron disappeared into the heart of the enemy formation. Explosions lit up space as human ships detonated themselves among Vorthak vessels, taking multiple enemies with each suicide attack. Hayes is gone, Clark reported quietly. Her whole squadron. Morrison nodded grimly. Mark them down as heroes. Continue the attack. By the end of the battle, the Vorthak Second Fleet had been completely destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed. 200 ships reduced to wreckage floating in space. Admiral Krexvar died trying to ram his crippled flagship into a human vessel, finally understanding how humans actually fought wars. The human casualties were exactly what Dr. Turner had predicted. 18,000 dead, another 12,000 wounded. Entire families wiped out when civilian ships were destroyed. Children who would never see their parents again. Zeftar found Morrison standing in the memorial hall again, looking at fresh names being added to the walls. Was it worth it? Zeftar asked. Morrison did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was tired but determined. Commander, in your 47 civilized wars, how many children died? Very few. Civilian casualties are minimized in proper warfare. In this battle, we lost 3,000 children. 3,000 young humans who will never grow up, never have families, never see Earth again. Zeftar felt sick. Then why fight this way? Why not accept the rules of civilized war? Morrison turned to face him. Because if we had lost today, Commander, all human children would have died eventually. The Vorthaks would have taken this system. Then the next, then the next. They would have reduced us to slaves or corpses within a generation. You don't know that. Yes, we do. Because we've seen what happens to species that lose wars of survival. We've been that species, Commander. We've been conquered, enslaved, nearly exterminated. We learned that lesson well enough to never need to learn it again. As Zeftar looked at the names on the memorial wall, thousands of them now, with more being added, he began to understand what made humans different from every other species he had studied. They were not better warriors because they were stronger or smarter or more advanced. They were better warriors because they had never forgotten that some things were worth dying for, and they had never forgotten that some enemies would never stop coming until they were made to stop forever. Zeftar sat in his quarters aboard the Liberty's Edge, staring at his completed report. 3 months of documentation, thousands of recorded hours, detailed analysis of human military capabilities. The truth about humanity's introduction to galactic warfare. The problem was simple. He could not send this report. If the Galactic Council read what really happened in the Kepler 442 system, panic would spread across civilized space. 300 species who had spent millennia playing at war would suddenly discover that real warfare still existed, and humans were very, very good at it. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Captain Morrison entered, now wearing the insignia of an admiral. His promotion had come through after the second battle, along with new orders that worried Zeftar. Commander, I wanted to speak with you before you returned to Galactic Command. Admiral Morrison, congratulations on your promotion. Morrison sat down across from him. Thank you. I also wanted you to understand what you've witnessed here, and what it means for the galaxy. Zeftar gestured to his datapad containing the report. I have documented everything, Admiral, but I am not sure how to present it to the Council. Tell me, what did you conclude about human military capability? That we have all been very fortunate you joined the galactic community peacefully. Morrison's smile was grim. You've seen less than 1% of our actual military strength, Commander. The forces I commanded here were local militia and converted civilian vessels. The words chilled Zeftar. 1%? Earth maintains a standing military of over 2 billion personnel. Our colonies add another billion. We have been preparing for interstellar warfare since first contact, assuming all conflicts would be existential threats. Communications Officer Linda Rogers entered with a message pad. Admiral, priority communication from Earth Command. Morrison read the message and nodded. Tell them we'll be ready. Ready for what? Zeftar asked. The hegemony has declared war on humanity. Apparently they were allies of the Vorthak Empire. They're mobilizing a coalition of 12 species to punish human aggression and restore civilized order to this sector. Zeftar felt the room spinning. 12 species? Admiral, that could be thousands of ships. Probably. Earth Command is sending the 3rd Fleet to assist. Should be here in 2 weeks. How many ships in a fleet? About 1,500 combat vessels plus support ships. The numbers were impossible. Zeftar had never seen more than a few hundred ships in any single battle. The humans were talking about fleet actions larger than most species' entire space forces. Dr. Karen Wells joined them, carrying a thick folder of documents. Admiral, You asked for the analysis of galactic military capabilities? What did you find, Karen? Total combined military strength of all galactic species is approximately 40,000 combat vessels. Most are designed for limited ritualized warfare according to the Corvani Accords. Morrison nodded. And our assessment of their combat effectiveness against human forces? Wells looked uncomfortable. Sir, it would be like sending wooden sailing ships against modern destroyers. Their weapons, tactics, training, everything is designed around civilized warfare. They have no experience with total warfare. Zeftar struggled to process what he was hearing. You're saying humans could defeat the entire galactic community in open warfare? Not easily, Morrison replied. We'd take heavy casualties. But yes, if it came to that, we would win. But surely you wouldn't. I mean, humans are peaceful. You joined the galactic community as partners, not conquerors. Morrison stood and walked to the viewport looking out at space. Commander, humans are peaceful when peace is possible. We prefer cooperation to conflict. But we learned a long time ago that peace is only possible when potential enemies know the cost of aggression. The hegemony and their allies don't know. They're about to learn. Lieutenant Carter approached with another report. Admiral Colonel Parker sends his regards. The 3rd Marine Division has finished interrogating the Vorthak prisoners. What did they learn? The Vorthak Empire has been planning expansion into human space for 2 years. They saw us as weak newcomers who could be easily dominated. The attack on Kepler 442 was intended to be the first step in conquering all human colonies. Morrison turned back to Zeftar. Do you see now, Commander? This was never a limited territorial dispute. It was the beginning of an attempted genocide. The Vorthaks wanted to destroy or enslave our entire species, but they could not have known how humans would respond. Exactly. They assumed we would fight according to their rules. Limited warfare, acceptable casualties, eventual surrender. They had no idea what they were starting. Dr. Wells showed Zeftar images from the interrogation reports. The Vorthak military doctrine assumes all species follow galactic warfare conventions. They literally do not have tactics for dealing with an enemy that fights to total victory. Neither does anyone else, Carter added. We've analyzed military doctrine from 30 major species. They're all based on the same assumptions. Limited goals, restricted methods, negotiated settlements. Morrison returned to his chair. Commander, I want you to understand something important. Humans did not start this war. We did not choose to fight according to our rules instead of galactic rules. We simply fought the only way we know how to win. And now? Now the galaxy is about to discover what total warfare looks like. The hegemony has declared their intention to destroy human civilization. From our perspective, they have declared a war of extinction. Zeftar thought about the memorial wall, the thousands of names, the casualties from just 2 battles. Admiral, if this escalates to full galactic war, how many will die? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Billions, probably. Maybe tens of billions. Can it be stopped? Yes, very easily. The moment our enemies decide to stop trying to kill us, we will stop killing them. But what if they don't stop? Morrison's expression became stone cold. Then we will make them stop. Permanently. As Zeftar prepared to leave the Liberty's Edge and return to Galactic Command, he realized his documentation of humanity's first galactic war had become something much more significant. He had witnessed the moment when the galaxy's age of civilized warfare ended forever. The question now was whether he should warn the Galactic Council about what was coming, or let them discover it for themselves. Morrison seemed to read his thoughts. Commander, you have a choice to make. You can file an honest report and cause panic across the galaxy, or you can file a sanitized version and let events unfold naturally. What would you recommend, Admiral? I recommend honesty. Tell them exactly what you've seen. Give them a chance to understand what they're dealing with before more blood is shed. And if they don't listen, Morrison walked him to the shuttle bay where Zeftar's transport waited. Then they'll learn the same way the Vorthaks did. As Zeftar boarded his shuttle, he carried with him the most important document in galactic history, a complete record of humanity's true nature. The galaxy called it civilized war, but Zeftar had seen humanity's real face. It was not the face of mindless savages or bloodthirsty barbarians. It was the face of a species that had learned, through countless wars and unimaginable suffering, that some things were worth any sacrifice to defend. The galaxy had spent 2,000 years forgetting what war really was. Humanity had never forgotten, and now they were about to remind everyone else. As his shuttle pulled away from the Liberty's Edge, Zeftar began composing his final report. Not the sanitized version that would preserve galactic peace, but the honest truth that might prevent galactic catastrophe. Personal log, Commander Zeftar, Galactic Observation Corps. Final entry regarding human military capabilities. Recommendation: do not threaten human civilians. Do not attack human colonies. Do not attempt to dominate human space. Humans do not fight according to our rules because they never needed rules to survive. They fight according to the only rule that matters: win or die. The shuttle jumped to hyperspace, carrying Zeftar back to a galaxy that was about to discover the difference between playing at war and waging it.